sure
There
the
we go.
business didn't work. Yeah.
And I'm going to take my water. And I have
What
no
if I
idea what I
get
did with my
thirsty?
purse.
Is
It's
this
on.
Okay.
It is.
Okay. Yeah. As Allison said, unfortunately, Elliot is at home changing diapers. I know that he would that he would love to be here with us. So I'm going to be just running this meeting. And I say, this is our first meeting of the season. Some people have expressed interest in running programs all during the summer and doing hikes and walks and things like that. So we want a team to come to volunteer. I think a lot of us feel like, oh, it's nice to have a rest in the summer, but also we miss these programs. So so something to think about in the future. And to add to that, what I wanted to say is that we really want people to get involved with the group on our board. Right now, we're actually looking for somebody to do membership and also somebody to help with volunteer coordination, which are two things, but also just to join the board to find out more about what we're doing, or if there's something that you want to pursue specifically, talk to me or any of the other board members. But other board members raise their hands that are here tonight. So we have a bunch of board members here. Anyway, feel free to talk to any of those guys. This Saturday, we're going to do a wildflower walk in Myakka River State Park with Mike Stanfield. If you all are familiar with Mike, he knows everything. And we were lucky enough, Rita and I were lucky enough to go with him and Zach and walk around Myakka and see different plants. I thought the biggest one that we saw that was new to me anyway was the wild cocoa orchid, which we saw on All Weather Road, but he's able to spot these things that you could walk by 100 times and not even see that. Can you think of something else that we might have seen, Zach? That was the biggest surprise for me, I think.
Oh yeah. I mean, so if there are any grass fans out there, if you're familiar with the floodplain, we're battling some invasive grasses in the floodplain. We saw some Learsia hexandra, so southern cut grass, which was really cool. I mean, I got excited about the grasses. We saw some swamp milkweed. So, with all that invasive grass right there in the floodplain, some of the excitement is right along the park drive. But yeah, in uplands, the wild cocoa was cool.
Yeah.
And then all the hibiscus, honestly. I mean, just because some of those zones were burned.
Yeah.
So I hope y'all get to find a pine lily. We didn't see any, but
Yeah, we were really hunting for that pine lily without success, but maybe one will pop up or something. Now, if you don't know Zach, Zach's also a ranger. You're a ranger at Myakka River State Park, but
so now biologist.
Now biologist, and he's going to be leading a kind of a follow-up, a few months later walk in Myakka River State Park in December. So to do the one this Saturday and then come back and take a look at it a few months later should be great.
What date is December?
Well, you're going to have to look online for that.
December 20th.
Oh yeah. Next month for this presentation, John McCarthy, who's head of Spanish Point, is going to be making a presentation here. So make sure to come back for that. I also wanted to say, Zach, which I should have said earlier, is they're thinking of starting up a native plant nursery at Myakka River State Park. You can either talk to Zach, or I don't know, Zach, if you want to say a few words about what that is.
Yeah. So just real quick, I have these little volunteer cards that I'll leave at the front table, if that's okay.
Yeah.
And so, we have a couple projects that are kind of in the initial phases right now. There are some restoration areas. So we're looking to collect seed of a couple different species, including red top panicum, bacatchi grass, a couple different things like that. And we also have some work that needs to be done in our herbarium. So there are just a couple little things that, I'm trying to recruit like a native plant ambassador. So what that would basically involve is, maybe just a few hours a month, or maybe a few hours every other week, something like that. Weekends, I can work weekends. My schedule is very flexible. So if you or of anyone who might be interested in getting some experience, doing some propagation or working in an herbarium, we could potentially do a little tour of the herbarium to kind of dangle as a carrot. check out one of these cards at the front table or just give a holler if you're interested.
Will there be a chance to learn more Latin from you, Zach?
Well, not all scientific names are Latin.
Oh, excuse me.
So it could.
Oh, snap.
But yes, Latin is my favorite language.
Okay, I think if you ended up doing that and being out in the park, I think Zach would be a lot of fun to work with. And also he brews his own beer, which we all know is some of the best in the county, maybe beyond that. Okay, I also wanted to thank Selby that lets us do this meeting every month, which, as we know, is one of the 100 greatest places on earth, according to Time Magazine. We already knew that though, right? Didn't we already know that? So I don't know if we had any other announcements. No, we're good. Okay. So I want to introduce Stacey Matrazzo, who has come all the way from Maitland, Florida, which I'm sure you all know is right next to Orlando, right?
I actually came from Orlando.
Oh, okay, from Orlando.
Yes, very good.
She's executive director of the Wildflower Foundation, which connects and expands native wildflower habitats in the state. Most importantly, she's a native Floridian. Yay! She is co-author of Native Plants for Florida Gardens, which she has sold out, so she didn't bring any of those. But Eric somewhere, who may have left, had a copy of it there. But I think you could probably get it on Amazon, right, or other places.
Or on our website.
Oh, okay, on the website. And she's going to speak to us tonight about saving Florida's roadside wildflowers. So I don't know, Allison, if we need your attention up here to get this thing going, or yeah, okay, okay. So let's give a warm welcome to Stacey.
Want my tea for water so I don't get choked up here. Thank you all for having me here tonight. I just have to say, wow, what a beautiful facility. Okay, I'm gonna make a disaster here first. Here we go. Is that better? Okay. Thank you all for having me. This is just amazing. I haven't been here in many years, so it's really cool to see, just see the garden and the buildings here. I think I can, yes, okay. Okay, so I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to you tonight. I'm going to be talking about our roadside program in particular. And how do we advance pages on this? Here we go. Sorry, we had some difficulties with the PowerPoint, so we're working with a PDF here that will not, there we go. We'll get through this. So yes, we're a statewide nonprofit. Our mission is to protect, connect, and expand native wildflower habitats. And we do that through planting, education, research, and conservation programs. You can learn more about our work on our website, flawildflowers.org. We are funded primarily by the state wildflower license plate. We are celebrating 25 years on the road this year, which is very exciting for us. But since our inception in 2000, we have brought in over $6 million in money from the sale and renewal of this plate. And that, along with donations and grants and memberships, allows us to do the type of work I'm going to talk about tonight, as well as our educational materials, which I brought a few things here tonight for you to take home if you're interested. We do field trips, we do webinars every month, we do research on wildflowers. We are also about to launch the Florida Native Seed Partnership, which is a statewide initiative to bring partners together to expand the availability of native seed for not just for consumer use, but for restoration, for mitigation, and for all the things we need to do to help manage what's happening here in Florida. So keep an eye out for that. If you're getting our newsletters, you should start to see some stuff. We've been kind of keeping it a little quiet for the last year, but we're ready to roll it out. So no, that's not where we want to go. Okay, so I am here to talk about roadsides, but I want to give just a little bit of background as far as why we are doing this program and why this matters. You all probably know this. I have a little bit of information that's probably preaching to the choir because you're all native plant enthusiasts, but we are an incredibly biodiverse state here in Florida. We are the 7th most botanically diverse state in the country. We have lots of native plants, endemic species, threatened and endangered species as well, biodiversity hotspots, and that's just the plants, right? I'm just talking about the plants, but of course the animals are just as important too. But we're also one of the fastest growing states in the country. So we're third most populous in the country behind California and Texas. We have about 1,000 to 1,200 people a day moving here. And to accommodate all that growth, we are developing our natural lands to build houses and schools and roads and all the infrastructure that's needed. And that equates to about 170 square miles of natural habitat developed every year. So that's a lot. And we're losing the land that support that diversity, the thing that makes us so unique and so cool, because we have all these amazing plants and ecosystems, but we're developing so fast that we're losing that. Our natural areas are shrinking. And what we know from researchers like Doug Tallamy, I'm sure most of you are familiar with Doug Tallamy. If you're not, look him up. He's got some really good data to support a lot of the work that we're doing. But what he and other researchers have found is that, as we continue to develop our natural areas and they are shrinking, they're becoming these isolated islands of habitat surrounded by development, and they are too small and too separated to meet the needs of our wildlife. And that includes our pollinators. Excuse me. I'm a hand talker, so if I have anything in my way, it's gonna go flying. Try to manage that. So, I'm sorry, I keep hitting the dance button. Here we go. So this includes our pollinators. And our pollinators are really important to us, right? They are food for many wildlife. Birds in particular rely on on caterpillars, baby butterflies, but our insects feed a huge array of wildlife. They also provide ecosystem services like nutrient recycling and beneficial pest control, non-chemical pest control, and most importantly, maybe to us, is pollination. This is an ecosystem service that they provide that is very important to us because that's how we get most of our food, right? About 1 in every 3rd bite of food pollination is necessary. So we need our pollinators. But our pollinators are in decline. And I'm sure you've seen these headlines, the insect apocalypse is upon us. It's very dramatic, but it's real. And this is a global issue too. It's not just a Florida issue, but a global issue where we're seeing significant declines in our insect populations. So as we continue to develop our landscapes, to develop our natural areas, we need to look for different ways to respond to that and different ways to bring native plants back into our built environment. So things like using native plants in our home landscapes, our municipal landscapes, removing or mitigating for those invasives and non-natives. But we can also look at roadsides as an opportunity for helping to address this problem. So we might not think about roadsides as habitat, but they can actually play a significant role in conservation of insect species. And there's other benefits too, which we'll also talk about. So we have over 250,000 miles of roads here in Florida, and they extend through all landscapes, all of our ecosystems. They are penetrating all of them. You might, I don't know if you're familiar with Project Remote. This is an organization that calculates like the most remote places in the country. So they're looking for places where you can get as far away from a road as possible. And looking here in Florida, the furthest you can get from a road is 17 miles. And that's in the Everglades, which is one of our largest natural areas so far. But so this isn't going to change, right? We're continuing to develop. So we're just going to have more and more proximity to roads. And these roads, like I said, they're penetrating all of our ecosystems. But the good news is that ecological health, safety, when we talk about transportation, and they don't have to be mutually exclusive. We can find ways to manage for both and make sure that everybody is satisfied to an extent. I'm not going to get on my soapbox about development. That's not what I'm here to talk about, but we have to accept the reality, right? So let's look for alternatives and find ways to manage what we have in the best way possible for our pollinators and for our plants as well. And we know that roadsides that are rich in diversity of species, particularly flowering species, herbaceous flowering species, are better for supporting pollinators than the roadsides that we mow constantly, or the ones that we plant with bahia and Bermuda grass, which are the most common species that are planted by DOT and others after disturbances, after construction. Those grass species are hardy, they're great for landscapes that are getting mowed constantly, but they're not providing resources for our pollinators. What we also know is that there is better and greater diversity and abundance of insects on roadsides that have this habitat. So there's a lot of studies out there right now that have come to these different conclusions or similar conclusions for different species. But just this one in particular is from the Xerces Society. I think I'm going in and out here. So the Xerces Society did this study that showed that bee abundance, native bee abundance, was twice as high on roadsides that had native plants, as opposed to those ones that have, the non-native grasses or the ones that are being mowed as well. So we know that roadsides restored, which is a different thing. We're not really going to be talking about restoring, but that is something that we can consider as well. But those that are managed effectively for our native wildflowers and for they're going to provide what our pollinators need. They're going to be sources of nectar and pollen. They're going to provide larval hosts. And if they're managed correctly, they can even be undisturbed nesting sites for many of our pollinator species as well. If you think about all the roads that exist, it's a lot, right? But if we start looking at them not just as thoroughfares for us, but also for pollinators to create, pathways, if you will, for pollinators, pollinator habitat, just think of the impact. Again, we have so many roads, 250,000 miles of roadways here. So just as roads allow us to travel from place to place, there's lots of things along the way where we can stop and have food, have water, rest, use the bathroom, all the things that we need to do. That's what our pollinators need too along these roadsides. So if they are managed with them in mind and with the idea of maintaining them for that purpose, then they can provide that same kind of transportation route with all the amenities that they need, just like what we get when we drive. So they can serve as pollinator pathways, right? And other wildlife too. I'm talking mostly about pollinators because that's a big concern right now, but other wildlife are going to use these, these pathways, these corridors as well. And they can become corridors to help restore connectivity between those disparate shrinking islands of habitat. That our roads, that's it, right? When we start developing, all we have left are the roads that connect those little pieces and remnants of habitat. But if we vegetate them, if we manage them, then they become part of that ecosystem too. And we also know, we've seen a lot of studies recently too that show that insect populations or insect species that have access to that connectivity also thrive better. And that preserves their ability to move in and out, mate with different populations of their own species. So we preserve genetic diversity. It also helps with plant dispersal. So it's really important that we think about these as in terms of pollinator habitat and not just roadsides. So conditions on roadsides are really great for wildflowers too. Most of them are open, sunny, dry landscapes, and a lot of our native wildflowers really thrive in those conditions. Some of them have swales or ditches, and we have a lot of aquatic species that can handle the harshness of what the roadsides bring and thrive in those types of conditions too. A lot of our ecosystems in Florida too are fire adapted, our plants as well. Many of them need that open canopy that fire provides for them to thrive. And so roadsides can serve in that regard as well, because they are generally tree-free. We don't have canopies or trees along our roads, at least not in close proximity to our roadsides. But they have to be managed. We have to manage them in ways that kind of mimic that fire cycle. And I'm not suggesting that mowing is a replacement for fire. That's not what I'm here to tell you. But the action of mowing can help in ways that fire helps. So it can mimic some of the benefits of fire, at least in those roadside habitats. And of course, we know too, we have a lot of fire suppression here in Florida, which is unfortunate because, as I said, we have a lot of species that rely on it. But our roadsides, because they can be managed in this way, can actually become refugia for some of these species that are endangered or threatened. You can see here the Harper's Beauty, which is on the upper left, a little yellow flower. This is an isolated population in the Panhandle that largely exists only on the roadside because its habitat has been compromised. Pitcher plants too are another species that are threatened or endangered, but we find them successful on many roadsides. And even if the species isn't endangered, we can still protect these plants that are getting close to being threatened because of habitat loss and other issues like the sandhill milkweed that you see in the right-hand picture. Excuse me. So mowing can kind of, like I said, it can open up the canopy and allow these plants to thrive. And so that's what we have on the roadside. Mowing can keep the woody species from encroaching and just make sure that they have what they need and allow these plants to persist, right? And to maybe even recolonize, which is what our hope is. We're seeing a lot of success with the sandhill milkweed in particular up in the Panhandle. And unfortunately, the Panhandle is like our best example of the roadside because we have Apalachicola National Forest. We have different climate and conditions up there too. So we have a really thriving program there, but it doesn't mean the rest of the state can't have something similar. So the best way to maintain these naturally occurring wildflower populations on roadside is to reduce how much we mow. Now I want to say that we think about mowing as bad, and it's not inherently bad. We just don't need to do as much of it as we do. We need to time it properly, and we need to be selective in terms of how we do it and where we do it. But it allows, if we do it properly, it can allow those wildflowers to thrive throughout their growing season. Because what we need is for wildflowers to grow, to provide pollen and nectar, and then go to seed so we get return. So timing that mowing to allow all of this to happen is what will help make this habitat and not just wildflowers on the side of the road. We also need time. We have to think about the pollinators and how they're migrating through and what they're utilizing at these different times of the year too. So mowing generally has two goals with regard to roadsides, and that is improving driver safety or visibility and allowing them to pull over safely. If a car needs to pull over, there has to be enough space for them to do so safely. This is what the state of Florida has dictated. But there's no need to mow the entire roadside to make this or to achieve this goal. So, and this is just kind of a diagram of the roadside so you can see the different aspects of it and what we're talking about. That safety strip that you see, that's where we have to mow. So that's going to get mowed much more regularly. But the size of that can vary depending on the type of road. So a big major highway that's going, 65, 70 miles an hour with many lanes, that's going to have a safety strip of about 10 feet. But as you get into smaller roads, county roads, or roads that have less lanes, reduced speeds, less traffic, that safety strip can be as little as 5 feet. So all of that remains beyond that safety strip is eligible for pollinator habitat if we just manage it properly. So mowing can improve the diversity of these habitats, but it shouldn't be done more than what we believe is twice a year. So all the research that we've looked at and the examples we've had with working this program for many, many years have shown that twice is enough, once is even better. So mowing after the wildflowers set seed at a time when pollinators are less active is really going to be the best in terms of making this a thriving habitat. And so we're talking about early winter, late fall, so after Thanksgiving generally into maybe early January. And that's going to vary depending on where you are in the state and what's happening climatically as well. But just looking at the natural cycle of whatever species are thriving on that roadside and timing it after most of them have gone to seed. And again, after most of those pollinators have done what they're doing. Some counties will do a midsummer mow, which is okay. It's not necessary, but it's okay. It times or it coincides with the natural fire or lightning cycle, so it can kind of mimic that. So that's okay as well, but those are the only 2 times a year that we really recommend mowing, depending on what's going on in that roadside. But even reductions, what we found is that even reductions from every 3 weeks to every 6 weeks of mowing is still impactful. So we've worked with counties and with other rights of way, vegetation managers, and kind of studied a lot of these different areas and what different managers are willing to do to see what that benefit is. And what we found is that, again, if you just reduce, it is going to help. It may not be ideal to mow every 6 weeks, ecologically speaking, but it's way better than mowing every 3 weeks. But what we hope is to get more counties and more vegetation managers to move to this once or twice a year. So there are lots of economic benefits to reduce mowing as well. In 2014, we funded a study with the Department of Transportation to look at the ecological and economic benefits of roadside wildflowers. And what they found is that simply by embracing these more sustainable roadside practices, which is primarily reduced mowing, that they could save 30% in management costs. So management costs are things like the contractors that they hire to mow, or the staff, depending on how that position is played out. But the people who do the mowing, their salaries, the equipment, the fuel, everything that goes into that, if we just cut back, we can save 30%, which is great. This is our taxpayer dollars, right? Going for something that's not necessary ecologically or for safety or any of the other reasons that we might think we need to do it. I have a letter too, you probably can't read it, but on the bottom is a letter from the Santa Rosa County Commission. Santa Rosa County is in the Panhandle, and it's where our wildflower program got started. We have still this amazing volunteer who's been shepherding this program for a number of years. But Santa Rosa County put 70 miles of roadside into a wildflower program, which means that they applied this reduced mowing protocol to 70 miles. And what they found in the first 3 years is that they saved $210,000. That's $1,000 per mile per year that they found, or that they saved just by changing their mowing practices. This doesn't even speak to the ecological value, which, for me is way more important, but economics is something that really resonates, especially with our commissioners and with the people in those positions. So to see that is incredible. And they've put more roadsides in the last few years into that program. So those savings are just going to continue to go up. And that study too by the Department of Transportation not only found the 30% savings, but it also found that we could save about $1 billion in ecosystem services. These are those things that the pollinators do, as well as the things that the plants do, like carbon sequestration and sequestering runoff, things like that. So things that we have to pay for to have them accomplished. But if we just let the plants and the pollinators do what they do, we get all these amazing benefits too. It's really hard to argue with this $1 billion. And I do have the citations for all of this. So if anyone's interested in reading these studies, most of them are on our website. We do host the Department of Transportation's wildflower program pages on our site, so you can also find it there. Come on. There we go. So in addition to saving money, wildflowers can also generate revenue. They are certainly beautiful. They attract people. They attract people who are interested in photographing them or looking at the fauna that utilize them. And so when those people come to do that, it can also, they'll spend money in that community. They might go to the restaurant or buy gas, or maybe they'll stay for a little bit, depending on what they're coming to experience. But it's anecdotal, but we do know that in certain areas where we do have large displays of wildflower, or perhaps we have endangered populations of plants, it does bring people in to the community, and they do spend money. Another economic benefit is to our agriculture as well. We are an agriculture state here. We produce a lot of food. Excuse me. And crop pollination is, or crop pollinators are responsible for a lot of that food. About, I think I said earlier, a third of everything we eat, or if you're vegan like me, 100% of everything you eat, it relies on pollination. So if we didn't have these pollinators, our plates would be really boring, but we'd also lose a lot of money because we wouldn't be able to produce the amount of food that we produce, not only for our population, but for exporting other places too. So roadside wildflowers can be a consistent and stable food source and habitat for those pollinators. They are utilizing the crops, they are getting some nourishment from them, but they're not getting everything they need. They still need our native wildflowers and our native flowering plants to get what they actually need in order for them to then do that job that we're relying on. And of course, there's other environmental benefits too. I mentioned carbon sequestration and you know, holding on to or cleansing our water and our runoff, reducing our runoff. They also, if we reduce mowing, we're going to reduce our fossil fuel consumption. We're going to reduce the emissions that come with using that equipment too. So this is great for the environment as well. Our forbs, our herbaceous ground covers, our wildflowers and grasses, even our healthy soils will you know, absorb that carbon and help mitigate for climate change. So, you know, we can't really argue with what we're doing here. It's right. I say we can get this in any angle, right? Tell me what you're interested in. I can tell you that wildflowers are going to solve the problem, at least with regard to roadsides. If it's just about beautification, heck yeah, those things are beautiful, right? This is what got me into this whole organization, is just being so amazed at the beauty of all the different wildflowers that we have. But if you're interested in supporting pollinators, if you're concerned about the pollinator apocalypse, or just wanting to make sure that we have appropriate habitat, wildflowers can do that. Helps the environment, I just mentioned that, can save money and generate revenue as well. How can we say no, right? And yet we do. So the wildflowers that you'll see on roadsides are going to vary depending on where in the state you are and what time of year, but there are quite a few that are really commonly available, or not available, commonly occurring on roadsides. Our state wildflower, Coreopsis, this is what's on our license plate as well. We have, I think, 12 native species of Coreopsis. Most of them are yellow. We do have one pink one, which you will also see on our license plate. That only occurs in the Panhandle. But this is one that you'll also see a lot in places where DOT seeds. Unfortunately, DOT doesn't do a lot of native seeding, but it does include the native Coreopsis. Fleabanes are really common. These are going to be primarily in spring and summer, but we have a few different species that you'll see in different parts of the state. This lovely little daisy-like flower. Black-eyed Susans, very common on our roadsides, and also another native that the Department of Transportation uses in their seeding. All of these are prolific seeders too, so once they're out there, if we let them thrive, they are going to produce a lot more afterwards. Grasses, we do have native grasses that do great on roadsides. Mostly our blue stems, our andropogon species are what we commonly see. Why do we need to plant Bahia and Bermuda when we've got these amazing native grasses that do just as well? Goldenrods too, these are our late summer and fall blooming wildflowers that we'll see sometimes on roadsides, especially in our coastal areas. And then our lyre-leaf sage, this is another one that's really common. It blooms in late winter, early spring, so you'll often see this around that time of year. But all of these are found throughout the state, and probably see it around here as well. So now that you know why wildflowers matter on our roadsides, why it's so important to help them thrive, I'm just going to take a second to tell you what we do and then what you can do, because of course we can't do our work without your help. So one of the ways that we help is we work with counties and public utility companies, rights-of-way, any vegetation manager that is interested in managing their wildflowers for roadsides. We can come in and help identify those areas. A lot of times when people come to us, they've already found roadsides that they want to get into a wildflower program, but we can also help figure that out in some cases. But then we come in and do surveys. So we'll do a 3-season survey, spring, summer, and fall, so that we can get a full baseline of what's occurring in that area. And that way we can really figure out the best way to manage those wildflowers and offer assistance. We're about to complete the fall survey for Citrus and Pinellas County. So kind of, I'm gonna get to your county because we really need some work here. But they came to us and said, we wanna do this. We've got some great roadsides. And so we've sent our experts down to go out and look and see what's there and document that. And we have volunteers that get involved and help as well. Once we know what's there, then we can create maintenance plans. So we can advise on how to mow, when to mow, how wide to mow. We can also advise on invasive species, how to remove them and what to do about that. I want to say though, we cannot enforce them. We do not have the authority to do anything beyond saying, this is what we found and this is what we recommend. So when we get those calls from people, you mowed our wildflowers. We didn't mow them, we didn't plant them, we didn't do any of that. We're just the conduit who's trying to advise. And now most of the time we have a great relationship with the ones who come to us, so it's not really an issue, but we do see that sometimes there's turnover in the contractors or the people who are in those positions. And so that does happen, but that's not the end of the world. But we can't enforce that. So I just want to make sure everyone understands that. And then once the roadsides have been surveyed and we have management plans in place, we have them in a program, then the signs go up. And the signs, depending on who's doing it, if it's a city, a county, or utility company, the signs can vary. You see a few examples here on the screen. But those signs tell passersby something's going on here, especially when nothing's visible, because there are going to be times throughout the year where you're not going to see that great display. There might even be times when those wildflowers are up that they're not going to be the most showy, depends on the species. So having those signs in place is a good signifier to the public and to those mowers and contractors and other people who are coming out there and interacting with that space. Oops. So, like I said, we can do all of that, but we need help figuring out how to, who wants this, where can it happen? Those are the areas that you can come in. Helping to identify wildflower areas is really important. So knowing what makes a good wildflower area is helpful, right? We're looking for naturally occurring wildflowers. So this is not the turnpike, but that beautiful display of non-native phlox and non-native coreopsis. We're talking about naturally occurring native wildflowers. So more of your rural county roads, ones that are adjacent to public conservation lands are really usually good candidates. We're looking for ones that don't have a lot of businesses and driveways, because those types of settings really tend to require a more formal approach to landscaping. And we're not talking about that either, right? We want our wildflowers to go wild. So this is not something that's really appropriate for a heavy business area, but in more rural settings, or again, with your natural lands, it is much more easy to make that happen. And just to remind you, so we need to look for roads that have at least 5 to 6 feet of right-of-way. If it's too much smaller, if your road is mostly safety strip and you've only got about a foot or so, 2 feet of right-of-way, it's not going to be the best candidate. If you think about how big the mowing tracks are, they just can, one little hiccup and they're right into your wildflower area. So we are looking for roadsides that have about 5 to 6 feet minimum of right-of-way. And again, I just brought the diagram up so you can see the right-of-way is where it's nice and beautiful with flowers, not that safety strip. And then also just looking at invasive species. So if a roadside is completely covered in invasives, it's probably not a good candidate, just because if we're going to put our energy in trying to make this program work, we don't want to spend all of our energy on a roadside that's going to be a real big problem. Invasives are a whole other talk, but finding ones that, if there is invasives there, it's not a big deal, but if it's a huge overgrowth, we might want to find something else. Something else you can do is become a wildflower watcher. This is a new program that we launched that allows people to get involved. So you can, again, identify roadsides, but you can also participate in our surveys. You might recognize these are a lot of FNPSers up here. If you do become a wildflower watcher, you get a really cool fluorescent roadside vest that says Wildflower Watcher on the back. But you can help, participate in the surveys, or once the road is in the wildflower program, you can continue to do surveys for us. We want to keep documenting those species even after we have figured out what's there. You can also report to us if maintenance plans are in violation, if something's being mowed at the wrong time, or if a sign has been stolen or run over. These things happen. So we need to know so that we can then alert the right people and have it dealt with, whatever the issue is. We have a form on our website. So we have a whole new roadsides webpage that you can go to and learn everything I've said and much more, but it includes this wildflower watcher section. We have a form. You can choose from reporting a potential roadside wildflower area to us, or reporting an issue. And then once you make that selection, we have some additional questions that we just ask you to answer, and that'll help us keep this program growing. And then and so we also look for things like, we want as much information as possible. So if you have GPS coordinates or species you saw, photos, anything you can provide will help. But even if you don't have any of that, if you're just driving by and you notice it, you can still report that to us, and we'll do our best to figure out what needs to happen. So the last thing that you can do is also help us with these resolutions. So a wildflower resolution is something that a county can adopt. It's an MOU. It's not a legally binding document, but it does give us a conduit to work with the county. It's the county saying, or cities can do this too, but it's them saying, hey, we want wildflowers here. We are recognizing the cultural, historical, and environmental significance of these plants, and we want to do what's right. And so that is a tool that we use to also work with DOT. So if there are state roads that we want to put in this wildflower program, DOT really wants the buy-in from the county, and this is a way to do it. But it also helps us work with the county public works departments and work with other entities within that area. You guys don't have a resolution. If your county was green, it would have a resolution, but y'all don't have one. So if anyone wants to volunteer, we would love to get something going here if possible. And we have all the information to help you. So this involves going to your county commission or your city commission and getting them to do this. And the reason that we don't do it is because most counties and cities don't want an outsider coming in and saying, hey, you need to have this program here. But if they have citizens, people who live here and participate in the community saying, hey, we want this here, they're more likely to do it. So we have the tools, we have all the resources. We also have a full-time roadsides program coordinator now who can walk you through everything. We are updating our guidance document. So we do have something on the website now, but in the next month or so, we should be rolling out an updated version of that. And that will tell you everything you need to know. And some of these resolutions are outdated too. We've been doing this program since 2009. So a lot of those county commissioners have come and gone, and we need help updating them too. So I just want to close with saying roadsides are not wildlands. We don't want to mistake them for that or try to pretend that they are. They cannot take the place of true conservation. That's something that we need to be thinking about. But if we do correctly manage these roadsides, they can play a big role in helping with the issues that I've mentioned tonight. So I want to encourage all of you to get involved. Again, if it's just filling out our form and saying, hey, I saw some coreopsis on this roadside. Can you check it out? We can do that. Just let us know, stay in touch with us. And then we have lots of other stuff on our website. And again, I brought some other things here, nothing related to the roadside program, but we have a lot of resources about selecting plants, putting, how to choose for your landscape, creating pollinator pots, all kinds of different things. We have monthly webinars, field trips, just all kinds of stuff that you'll find on our website and our social media as well. So anyway, that's all I have. Thank you so much for your time, and appreciate it. Hi.
Can I ask a question?
Do we have time for questions? Okay.
Questions?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I'm just concerned though. You mentioned the different, kind of broken up with our habitats. So I'm thinking the roadside is right next to all the fumes and gasoline. Doesn't that affect the wildlife? No.
So for pollinators, there are some studies that support. And Jarrett Daniels, I don't know if you're familiar with Jarrett. He's out of the Florida Museum at the University of Florida. He's done a lot of studies on this too, but there are others nationwide that show that while there is mortality, so we do have pollinators that are impacted by the vehicles, they don't want to cross the road. If they have abundant and good habitat on the roadside, they tend to stay in that area. So you're gonna get some mortality just by the nature of where we are, and that's gonna happen, but it's not significant compared to the value that that roadside habitat provides. And again, we have, we have all the studies on our website, so, but people like the Xerxes Society are constantly looking at this too, and Jared Daniels is working with DOT and conducting a lot of other roadside related studies to really just, we're trying to bolster this and really make people understand that it is of value, even though we do get that question a lot. Yes.
So one of the biggest issues, at least in my line of work, is the invasives that come in with the turf. Torpedo grass and coating grass is problem number two big ones. How do you deal with this? Like when you're going in to put in a new wildflower meadow, do you pull up the turf first? Do you spray it? How do you deal with that?
Well, we don't install meadows. So that's not, when we're talking about roadsides, we're talking about managing what's there, not planting for the most part. If we're looking at installing meadows, if we're looking at rights of way as opportunities for that, we tend to try to avoid as much as possible with regard to that. Kogan grass, I don't know. We've not found a way to manage that, unfortunately. So when we're looking at, we do planting grants and offer support for public plantings as well. And we really just try to steer away from that because we don't have the answer for how to mitigate for species that are that problematic. But like I said, we'd rather concentrate on low-hanging fruit to get that up and going before we try to manage for Kogan grass. And I wish I had a better answer, but if someone does figure out how to deal with that, we would love to hear it too, because it's a nightmare. Yes.
Trail systems have become popular throughout Florida. Sarasota, we have the Legacy Trail. Do you have any kind of program starting to manage the swales on these trails so that they have wildflower opportunities?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, with Pinellas County, that's what they're doing. Pinellas is highly developed. They don't have a lot of rural roads or even, candidate roads for this type of program. But what they asked us to do is come in and survey roads within their parks and along their trail systems to do exactly this. So we can provide the same services for trails, and we've worked with counties. We've actually done some plantings on trails too. It's a little bit easier to do than the roadside plantings. But yeah, the same principles apply, and that is something that we're exploring more, working with the Greenways and Trails organization, and yeah, trying to find more of that. Yes.
Stacey, the program just, as you describe it, seems like such a slam dunk. Why would
you'd think?
Yeah. So maybe is there a lot of resistance to it when you propose it, and what are the problems?
Sometimes, well, we're just getting that, and I kind of didn't even bring up our relationship with DOT because we were founded. This license plate was a whole thing about DOT and roadsides, and we got away from that for many years because DOT got away from it, and we're just now reinvigorating that with the Monarch CCAA and all the things that they're required to do. They're finally going, oh, hey, maybe what you've been saying all this time is something we want to do. But what we've found is that the contracts with mowers it's baffling to me that it's more cost effective to let them keep mowing than to stop mowing because of the way some of these contracts are written. And I can't really speak to why it doesn't make sense to me, but that has been a pushback where they're just like, we can't change that. So we're trying to keep having these conversations so that when they're able to, when they get to the point for contract renewals or whatever, that they can make some adjustments. But it's just a mindset too. People think that it's dangerous to have wildflowers on the roadside, but we know how wide that safety strip needs to be. And, we get questions like, won't the deer just come bounding out of the forest? It's not like we are asking for a forest up to the edge of the road, but it's just this mindset that we're really trying to, it's probably similar in a way to just the battle we have over native plants, which I know all of you understand. Like just getting people to think a little bit differently is not as easy as you think.
You just hit on something that I've been troubled with. What is your distinction between native plants and native wildflowers?
Wildflowers are just herbaceous by nature, but you know, if you look at our profiles, we have plant profiles on our website. We have everything that's flowering on there. It's not just for roadsides, it's herbaceous. We don't want woody species because they're going to grow up and either if they're trees, they're going to shade out or they're going to become dangerous. They're going to contribute to the imbalance in the ecosystem or the roadside ecosystem if we let the woody shrubs grow up. So when I'm talking about roadsides, I am specifically talking about herbaceous flowering species and grasses, which do flower. But as far as our organization, we are the Wildflower Foundation, and that goes back to why we were founded with regard to the roadsides, but we're a native plant organization. We don't live in a state that's just meadows, right? We need all of our different plants for different things. So yes, very important. Yes.
I'm just moved here temporarily from Texas, but it seems like they've got a fantastic program for this in their DOT, another Republican state. So there's no, you would think that kind of connecting the two might work because it's been hugely successful there, especially for tourism, because they actually have wildflower routes through central Texas.
Well, and that's
in the hill country area. It's just, you can literally follow 40, 50, 100-mile routes of just wildflowers in the spring, and all the hotels and everything sell out. So
that's where we came from, and we're trying to get back there. When the license plate was being suggested, it was because Lady Bird Johnson invited the governor's wives from different parts of the Southeast, and she just passed away a week ago, but one of our founding members, Ann McKay, she was the wife of Buddy McKay, who was our lieutenant governor and briefly our governor. She went and was inspired by Lady Bird Johnson and came back here and was with the garden clubs working to get our wildflower program going. And we were only working with DOT in the beginning, and it was great. And they were buying native seed, and everything was hunky-dory. And then things changed. They were finding cheaper seed from out of state. They were finding, non-native species were thriving better. I can't explain exactly why, but they just kind of went away from the program. And so our program started to diminish until we started working with counties and cities and, figuring out that we can still do this even if we don't have DOT's buy-in, which thankfully they're coming back into the fold. But we would love to see that. We would love to be the next Texas roadside speaking. That's all. Yeah. Yes, I'm sorry. I don't know. I don't want to just keep monopolizing this. So we need to go.
Take one more question.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, well, you haven't asked one yet, so.
Any insights into FDOT and just like mitigation? So just in Sarasota, we had several miles worth of native trees that were just taken down to expand from 3 lanes to 4 lanes, emerging diamonds. So is it already been decided if any mitigation is going to be done, or can your group or a group like ours have a seat at the table to say, like, you took those down?
It's a good question, and unfortunately, I don't have a happy answer for that. But yeah, the programs, the things that they have planned are decided years in advance. And we had a contractor for a couple of years tasked with watching. He's a former DOT employee, and we hired him to specifically watch their ETDM system to see these upcoming programs. But we found that even those we weren't getting the information soon enough. But these things are years, they're planned years in advance. So that kind of construction is really hard. We're battling in Tallahassee with a roadside program, a road project that we're just trying to do what we can to keep what's there. They've got some, really great populations right outside the city. But that remains to be seen. So, if you find out about something, there's no harm in petitioning DOT, but I feel like what we're trying to do is we have a better chance of success if we concentrate on what's out there and try to preserve it. It doesn't mean it's going to be protected forever, but Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have a better answer for that. But I'm hoping that with our renewed relationship with DOT, that we might be able to build something else into that, but that remains to be seen. So anyway, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Stacey. That is terrific. I think we're all really interested in what you guys are doing, and to hear that we haven't done much of that in Sarasota is